Hello and welcome. My name is Sarah Tregoning, and I am the Student Accessibility and Success Advisor here at Augustana campus, and my pronouns are she and her. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to manage group work well. So mostly this is talking about how to do a group presentation together, but most of what I'm saying applies to any kind of group presentation. The most important thing for you to do is to know your group. Um, You may be total strangers when you first get started. Maybe you were assigned to a group and you haven't met anyone else that you're going to be working with yet. So you have to start off by getting to know your group members. It's a lot easier to work well together when you know who people are and what they do well. So start by figuring out who each person is and what are their strengths and weaknesses. Um, you want to make sure that in your, whether it's a presentation or an assignment, you're taking advantage of each person's strengths. So, for example, if you know someone is really technologically gifted, then you're probably going to want them heavily involved in making sure the presentation works well. If you know that somebody is good at leading discussions and that's part of the assignment, then that's the person you want doing that. Take advantage of your natural strengths. Also recognize that different people have different work styles. Now, if you have not done a lot of group work, then you may have been focusing totally on individual assignments. And you may take a more competitive approach to your classmates. That is not what group work is about, and that is not going to make a functional group work, uh, a functional group. So focus on how you're all going to fit together to create the best assignment you can. So if different people have different work styles than you do, it doesn't mean that you can't work together. It just means you have to adjust to differences between you. This is going to help you. The better you know your group members, the better you can figure out, okay, who's going to start off the presentation and who's going to finish it? Who are strong, confident speakers? Because there may be some who are more experienced than others. That's probably who you want to introduce or finish the presentation, although everyone is going to have to play a role. Um, Also, one of the key things in group work is that as different as you are, those differences are a huge asset because when you look at a more diverse group, the solutions or the approach they take or the final product they come up with is much better if it is a more diverse group. So embrace that diversity, make it work for you, and make sure you are hearing and respecting everyone. This is all about cooperation, and you have to tolerate different perspectives as part of that. So bear that in mind when you're thinking about your group work. Also, when you're assigning roles in the assignment, if it's a presentation, does everybody have to speak or can someone contribute elsewhere? So if, for example, you have someone who experiences extreme incapacitating anxiety when they have to speak publicly, and fear of public speaking is the number one phobia. So it's not unusual. But if you have a group member who just finds that they completely shut down and can't do it, then that's probably not the best role for them. So can do some contributions elsewhere? Can they do more of the stuff on the back end, do more of the research, or help more with putting it all together? Can they make sure that it's all fits nicely? They can contribute extra elsewhere if other group members will step up and do the actual presenting. And if this is an assignment where your professor has said, everyone needs to present, then talk to the professor about that. Let them know what's going on because, in my experience, most professors are willing to come up with alternatives for that. Just make sure if you're the non speaker that you are demonstrating your contribution elsewhere. You also want to, once you've gotten to know group members, and I mean, spend some significant time on that in your first meeting, you want to establish the ground rules for all members to follow. This is the behavior guidelines that group members agree to. Um, Everyone has to agree to these when you come up with them. Usually they follow things like how meetings will be organized, will anyone be taking notes, what behavior is unacceptable. So things like non-attendance, poor timekeeping, lack of communication, absenteeism, those kinds of things. Everyone establishes what your group's rules are, basically. And you also need to figure out how you might deal with things that are unacceptable. If you figure that out when you're first sitting down and meeting and take a really collaborative focus, then everybody understands what the rules are and what they need to be doing. And definitely make sure you write all of that down, make sure everyone agrees to it, and then email out those rules so that everybody has a record of it. It's there to be a guide. If something isn't working, discuss what's happening. So if you have an issue where a group member is not communicating or falling behind on the work they're supposed to be doing, don't assume they're being lazy. Assume that something is going on with them. So in your next group meeting, bring it up right at the very beginning. Say, okay, Sarah, you haven't been responding to emails about the project and we're not sure where you are in the work you're supposed to be doing. Is something going on? What can we do about this? They may be having a crisis, they may be having computer problems. You really don't know until you talk about it. And then once you're talking about it, make sure you're not taking a blame approach, but think about, okay, this problem has come up. How can we fix it? And support the entire group at the same time. People are going to want to work with you and feel more positively about the assignment, the more positive you can make the group experience. So one of the first things you should be doing is creating a plan. We talked about once you get to know your group and figure out what their strengths are, you want to create a task list so you know what needs to get done. The task list is not create a presentation. It's much more detailed than that. You also want to schedule due dates for each stage of the work. So if it's over the course of an 11-week term, those may be quite spread out, but the earlier you schedule them, the more likely it is that people will actually show up on those dates. And put them right in the calendar. Those meetings, those regular meetings, are to make sure work's getting done, to touch base with each other, to get the updates, the latest versions of the different pieces that everyone's working on, and to problem solve if you've run into problems. So you want to, during those meetings, decide how often and for how long each meeting is going to be. Is this something you're going to meet every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks? Maybe as you get closer to the due date, you're meeting every 3 days. Decide ahead of time and decide how long you're going to meet. Putting a time limit on it really helps you stay focused when you're meeting and whip through things. And if you find you're not getting through everything you need to in one meeting, then maybe you can follow up with email or schedule an extra meeting. So you want to also decide what will be discussed at each meeting. Decide that ahead of time. Put that information in the notes section or the memo section of the calendar event. Make sure there's a reminder so everyone understands what you're going to be talking about and people can attach documents maybe to the meeting. Here's an example. If you go to aug.ualberta.ca/group work schedule, this is a sample schedule that you can use to figure out how you want to use your meetings and keep things going. And as I said, if it's impossible to find a time to meet, try just communicating through emails because lots of stuff can get done that way. So here's the sample meeting schedule. So we talked about in the first meeting, setting the ground rules, sharing contact information, finding strengths and weaknesses of group members, deciding who presents when, deciding who's going to take notes and distribute them, agreeing on the presentation objectives, dividing up who does what. The second meeting, you're coming back with some of that work having been completed. So you're starting to organize and focus your efforts more. So it may just be everyone's done some research and you're pooling the research to figure out what you want to focus on, but have an idea of what you're going to be doing. So things you can do to create a strong presentation specifically, you want to base your work always not only on the assignment description in the course outline, although that's where you start, but also the rubric. Your professor should be providing you a rubric. And if they haven't already done that, email them and ask them for one, because that spells out exactly what they're going to be looking for when they give marks and what is going to get you a 1 out of 4 and what's going to get you a 4 out of 4. And that way you can aim to hit that 4 out of 4. You know what you need to include to get that mark. Decide on the purpose of your presentation. So what is the most important thing for people to understand? And make sure that all of you have that same understanding. And you want to make sure that all of the parts of the presentation flow together well. So you're creating one presentation or one final report, not 5 mini versions. So if you have 5 group members, you want to make sure that even if different people are writing different sections or creating different parts, it's all going to come together to work well as one document or one presentation. So early on, make sure you decide on a template, a format. The simpler, the better. Material always looks better when it's kept fairly simple. And that you have someone checking on the continuity. Share and back up everything. This is crucial to avoiding catastrophe. I talked to a student last semester who had done a huge amount of work for assignments, and their computer crashed and took everything they'd done for the entire semester with it because everything was saved on their desktop. Do not save everything only on your desktop, especially when you are working in a group. So it's better to use a shared drive, which you have access to through your UAlberta Gmail account. Use a shared drive to store the material for your group presentation. So this is where you're going to upload research people have done, sections of the presentation or report that people have worked on, so that everyone has access to it in the group. If somebody suddenly leaves the group, let's say someone withdraws from the class, you still have access to the material they were working on, so the rest of the group members can come together and finish the presentation. It also lets you work together well. So make sure you back up everything. If you have a working version that you're using on your desktop, make sure you save it still to the shared drive so that you've got it in more than one place, but make sure that you are always using the current version. So whatever is saved wherever, make sure it's the most up to date. If different people are working on different sections, then I recommend you label them as things like group presentation ST. And everyone knows it's Sarah Tregoning, my section of the presentation that is there. That way everyone can work on different pieces and not mess up each other's work. But when you're putting it together for the final version, you want to make sure all of those pieces fit together well. You want to run through it and check the formatting of everything and make sure it all looks the same, that it is consistent throughout in terms of style and format, and that it flows well from section to section. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've learned something helpful about group work. If you have any questions, you can email me at augar@ualberta.ca. Or if you're interested in signing up for more workshops, go to calendly.com/augar. Thanks and have a great day.